two, 1 2. Mic check, mic check. 1 2, 1 2. Mic check, mic check. 1 2. Luke, listen to it now. You should get some room noise. 1, 2, mic check.
Everyone. Thank you for being here. I need the mic. Let's go here. Oh, or I can use this. Is it on? Yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm happy to see so many faces, some familiar, some not so familiar. Hi, Danby. Welcome to our Caribbean Heritage Month special. My name is Dawn Walker, and I am Vice President of Communications and Marketing. Before we get started, though, I'd like to take a moment to invite our Chief of Staff and Senior Vice President, Jamie Gregg, to bring greetings on behalf of Dr. Riley. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome. On behalf of Dr. Riley, I'd like to thank you all for coming. My name is Jamie Gregg, Senior Vice President, Chief of Staff in the President's Office. I'm going to make this quick because it is hot and we should get on to the main event, right? So I just want to say what a joy it is to welcome you to this very special Caribbean Heritage Month event. At SUNY Downstate, we're proud to celebrate the incredible legacy, resilience, and brilliance of the Caribbean community. Not just this month, but every day, in every corner of our campus, and of course, in our neighborhood. Today, we're especially honored to be in conversation with someone who embodies that legacy in both word and deed, Mr. Gregory Bishop. Welcome and thank you. Mr. Bishop is the son of Grenada and East Flatbush, a Brooklyn original, whose journey from the hallways of SUNY Downstate, where his mother cared for patients in our HIV unit, to the forefront of social impact through the Sci Foundation Social Justice Fund is nothing short of extraordinary. If you've read about Gregg in the New York Times or followed his work building coalitions across the city, you know this. He leads with heart, history, and a fierce belief in the power of community. Whether it's championing small business, lifting up underrepresented founders, or reimagining what equity looks like in philanthropy, Gregg shows us that cultural identity and public service are not separate callings, but deeply intertwined. His story reminds us of our responsibilities as an academic medical center in central Brooklyn, to keep care close, to fight for justice, and to invest in the communities that raised us. Gregg, we're proud to welcome you to SUNY Downstate. And to everyone here, thank you for showing up, for celebrating, and for helping us keep the spirit of heritage alive through action. Let's listen and learn together. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie. So guys, we're gonna have fun today. Are we ready for some fun? Okay, cool. So I'm happy to welcome you to our Caribbean Heritage Month event, Transnational Struggles for Justice, Connecting Grenada, the U.S., and the Caribbean American communities. I know that kind of sounds like a UN thing, but let's not worry, we're bringing the rhythm, right? The real talk, and probably a few arguments about who makes the best cocoa tea, or who makes the best roti, or who makes the best curry. And you'll notice my Guyanese accent coming out. At Downstate, we just don't talk equity. We walk it, we cook it, we dance it, and sometimes we even knock 10 with it. You all know this, right? Okay. So at Downstate, like I said, we do everything here, right? But like any proper domino table, we know when to study the game, when to sip our tea, and when to slam that domino down, like I just did. And let's not forget, we're having this conversation in the heart of the Caribbean diaspora, right here in Brooklyn. Flatbush, Crown Heights, Canarsie. This borough is home to one of the largest Caribbean populations outside the Caribbean itself. We got Guyanese. Wave your flag. Grenada. Woo! Haitian. Trini. Did I miss Jamaica? No, I can't miss Jamaica. Bajans. Where the Bajans? There's one there. We love you, we love you, we love you. We got the Panamanians. There we go. We got the Cubans. Bahamian. Dominica. Where's Dominica? I know you all here. You name it, we add spice and soul to the city, right? Okay. In fact, over 600,000 New Yorkers have roots in the Caribbean, and you can feel it in our schools, our hospitals, our parades, our patties, and our politics. Brooklyn isn't just with old ideas, building justice brick by brick. Gregg Bishop. Now let me brag on this Grenadian Brooklynite genius for a minute. I've known Gregg for about 15 years when we first met working in the Bloomberg administration. He's always been a stand-up guy, quietly making moves and creating paths to benefit the lives of others. He was raised right here in Flatbush where the curry is hot and the dreams are big. In fact, his mom, Miss Yvette Williams, shout out Miss Williams. There you go. She retired from Downstate as a nurse after 34 years, where she was a star in Downstate's STAR program at a time when the country was just beginning deeper work with those affected by HIV and AIDS. Shout out, Miss Yvette. And special thank you for all the good seed you've helped sow here at Downstate. Gregg is also the former New York City Commissioner of Small Business Services. That means he's helped thousands of people keep their lights on and chase their visions. Now he's the executive director of the Sci Foundation's Social Justice Fund, making sure money moves where equity lives. He's been out here creating opportunities, building bridges, and making policy. Yes, making policy. Critical. He's proof that you can bring your full Caribbean self to the table and still rewrite the rules. So today we're lifting up the spirit of the diaspora, the spice, the hustle, the love of community, and the unstoppable energy that says, if I eat, we all eat. So pull up your chairs, pass the dominoes. No, let me fix that. Pass the dominoes and bring your whole self to the conversation, because we're not here to play it safe. We're here to knock 10 for culture, justice, and everything in between. Let's get into it, folks.
Where do you want me to start?
So, we have a lot of good things to talk about. So, let me start with something simple. Curry chicken or chicken curry?
So I'm gonna offend all the Guyanese in the room. It's the seasoning of the meat, so it's curry chicken. See, now you got me in trouble already. I know, we started with controversy already.
That's the way to start it, right? So I also want to say a special thank you to those who are joining us online, to my family, friends, and those I've held a bullet to your head. Please be here. But you know, this is how we do, right? We pull the family together from every corner of the world. Okay. So, Greg, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. I know we talked briefly about some of the things. Can you all hear me? Okay, sorry. Oh, yeah, that is much better. So let's talk about roots and, personal lens and identity from Grenada to Brooklyn. Talk about your upbringing here. When you first got here, the culture shock, because there's always a culture shock when you come from one place to another.
Yeah.
So talk about some of that for us.
Yeah, so first of all, Dawn, thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the whole Downstate family for coming. It's so overwhelming to see a packed room. Everyone is saying welcome to Downstate, but for me, this is like a welcome. It's sort of like a returning home as someone who has enjoyed, and I say enjoyed, the privileges and all the things that come from a mom who worked in this institution for all her career. I benefited tremendously from the Downstate family. Some of the security guards might have retired already, but they knew me by face because I was here all the time. But first, I want to, first give God all the honor and the glory for even me being here, because, but for the grace of God, we have many turns in life, and I cannot sit here and tell you that this is something that I planned, right? This is something that, when I was this age, I wanted to do this. When I was that age, I wanted to do this, et cetera, et cetera. I have been blessed tremendously, and I think our whole family has been blessed tremendously. I was raised by my mom. I'm an only child, a single parent, as we were talking about earlier, and we will continue to talk about in this conversation. My mom came to this country during a time where I think immigration policies made sense. All of us are nodding our heads. She came here for what we all came here for opportunity, but also to give back to this country, because this country creates opportunity. This institution creates opportunity for individuals. And certainly it is our responsibility to also give back to this country. And so I came here when I was 7, and I joke around, I don't think I have an accent anymore. But I did go to school in Tallahassee, Florida, so folks down south could pick up the accent faster than up north. But my mom felt that my accent would not survive in public school, so she sent me to parochial school, and Downstate funded that. And so I certainly had the resources in terms of, St. Stephen's Lutheran Parochial School gave me the opportunity to attend one of the best high schools in Brooklyn Tech. There's some Tech Knights here. All right. I love how Tech Knights are quietly controlling Brooklyn. Every time I say Brooklyn Tech, there's always someone in the room. I love it. I was a mechanical engineer, so I was a nerd. Never played basketball, so I'll fast forward the story. But it was those opportunities that allowed me to become the person that I am right now. I do not have, and what you're seeing on the resume that you heard is sort of like I say to folks, I'm an iceberg, right? It's literally, you see the top of sort of like the iceberg, but you don't know how deep. And the things underwater is a lot of disappointments, right? I only applied to one college. I got rejected. Didn't know what to do, so I went to New York City Tech. So shout out to CUNY and our institutions who are there as a sort of a saving grace for people who don't have their sort of like life proceeded. I transferred over to Brooklyn College and studied computer science. And certainly I wanted I said I wanted a challenge, and I got the challenge. But I was also a nerd, so I taught myself how to code. And I did the unthinkable. For every single parent in this room, I dropped out of college. And of course, you could only imagine the drama in the house when that happened. Because that is not what my mom came here for. And that is, but I was blessed enough to I had a almost 8 year career in tech because I was passionate about the work. And certainly, it's a longer story. We could be here all day, and the governor would have to come in here and make her announcement. But fast forward, individuals that I interacted with poured into me. They mentored me. And that is important for everyone in this room. You are in a stage of your career where someone is looking at you and looking up to you, and you may not even know it. But mentorship is so important. And I had important mentors in my life who created opportunities, who said, hey, I know of an opportunity at this company. You should actually, I spoke to them about you. And so I just moved from different companies. I worked for Jim Cramer at TheStreet.com. I moved over to Oxygen Media. And then September 11th happened. And I think that has impacted a number of people. The other day, I met someone who did not know what the Twin Towers looked like. I mean,
Okay, we're old.
yes. It was at that moment I realized that I was old. And I had to explain to them, the psychological impact that losing the towers had, just like if we were to lose Downstate, the psychological impact it would have had on Central Brooklyn. So I'm very, very excited that the community rose up and recognized the importance of this institution. I decided to go back to school, and I say I decided as if I just woke up one morning. There was definitely mother and family involvement, and certainly Florida A&M, which is a historically Black college and university. So again, shout out for HBCUs, because they too create opportunities. And frankly, I would not be sitting in front of you if I did not get my bachelor's from Florida A&M, because quickly I went and got my master's from Florida State. And when I returned to New York, I was working at a nonprofit teaching young people technology skills who did not have the traditional path, right? This was my lived experience. And so I was passionate about that work. So NPower was the company I worked for. And at a banquet, actually, where we were raising funds, someone from the Bloomberg administration, and this is where our stories connect, she approached me and said, do you want to work for government? And I said, absolutely not. Because the experience that I had with government was, being sort of like, afraid of the police, right? Going to DMV and waiting an hour in one line just to be told you're in the wrong line. So for me, government was like inefficient. It wasn't friendly. And so why would I want to work for this thing? But she kept on telling me about this opportunity where Mayor Bloomberg was trying to restart the Minority and Women Enterprise Program, which helps minority and women-owned businesses get contracts with the city. And in my head, I did the calculation and said, if I'm trying to find work opportunities for young people, especially young people from my community, from East Flatbush, Brownsville, Harlem, et cetera, then this is where I need to start. And I took a leap of faith. I joined the administration in the last year of his second term. We all know what happened. A third term came. I got 5 years out of Bloomberg. And then I was blessed enough that the de Blasio administration asked me to stay on. And then in 2015, Mayor de Blasio appointed me commissioner. So everything that I have done is based off of my lived experience. It's based on my understanding of community. It's based on my understanding that equity and opportunity should not be a bad word, right? Because we are tasked with creating, I tell people I come from privilege, right? It sounds crazy. I grew up in East Flatbush, but I grew up in a private house. I had a backyard, right? I went to a private school. That's privilege. And once you understand that privilege, then you understand that you could actually, there are some people based off their zip code, they don't have access. And so we need to make sure that we create opportunities for individuals so that way their zip code doesn't determine their future. I told you we could spend a whole day here, so I don't.
We just have to
I
bring
get
you back
passionate
another
about
day.
this. Yeah.
We just have to bring you back another day for a whole day of conversation. So you talked a little bit earlier about mentoring, and I know that's a big piece in what you do and what you believe in. And that's something that when I speak to people also, I strongly encourage. Can you talk a little bit more about the mentors that you've worked with and what you've learned from them?
So let me start with the professional mentors and then the personal mentors, because the personal mentors I had in my church, and that's a whole other conversation. But the professional mentors, I will never forget. My first, he actually, Dan Woods, was my first. I would actually there was a lot, right? So Dan Wood, Sadiq Bello, even Barbara Chang, like I could name them all. Who everyone created an opportunity, and I would say one of the things that I learned from all of them. Number one, as a leader, you can't be insecure. Insecurity and leadership are oil and water. An insecure leader is a terrible leader, to be honest with you. And I say things that are very controversial, by the way.
I mean, we could have another conversation about that statement alone.
One of the things that, as the commissioner, what I wanted to do was build a team that was not only reflective of the diversity of the city of New York, but also that I know what I know. And if I don't know someone, I'm not and should not be intimidated by someone who actually knows more than I do in that particular area. A matter of fact, it just makes me a smarter leader because I have somebody smarter on the team, right? And so definitely, not being insecure. I think also one of the other things I learned from my mentors is and I mentioned this about privilege. You have to understand. I'm a 6'6" Black male, right? So there's privilege in being a male. There's privilege in being the height that I am. When I walk into a room, I command attention. I know this, right? And so I have to figure out a way when I have the attention, how to use that to help others who don't have the ability, right? And that is the same thing whether you're a Caucasian male, right? You have certain privilege, right? One of the things, and I could talk about this in terms of the work that we do now, when we look at access to capital, for example, if you are a person of color who founded a company and you're trying to get venture capital dollars, only 2% of all the funds out there will go to you. If you're a woman, it's 0.5%, right? And you need to understand that. So if you are a white male in that world, once you understand the privilege that comes with, then your job is to make sure that you connect. And it's not necessary. We're not talking about affirmative action. We're not talking about putting unqualified people into positions. What we're talking about is simply opening up the door, right? I have access to this network that you don't have access to, right? So I'm going to introduce you to my friend. Literally, that is literally what it means when you talk about privilege. So not being insecure, understanding your privilege, and then diversity.
And
I was going to say, so diversity, and we have talked about this. It is a shame that we're at a period of time in this country where the term DEI has become politicized. I will say that we should hold on to it and we should fight to make sure that it doesn't become a negative thing. You will see the history of this country. If there's something that unites us as a people, it will be turned into something negative.
Yes.
You could go back to the 70s. Remember, I'm Black and I'm proud. That was sort of like, a negative thing. Black Lives Matter became a negative thing. Anything that unites us as a people, like we have thousands of flags, and I'm exaggerating, it's only about 10. But but if you look at the diaspora, we have so many different flags. And yes, we talk about who has the best roti, who has the best curry, who has this. But guess what? We all come from the same source, right? And so it is important for us to understand whether I am from Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Grenada, Jamaica, et cetera, we're all part of the same diaspora.
Yes.
And that is what unites us. And so it is by design to divide us, right? And so when we have these terms, DEI, and when you have this sort of like false narrative that you lost your job because somebody of color was necessary to place because of quotas, that is false. You lost your job because you're mediocre, right? You don't have the skill sets, right? And so we have to be careful about understanding diversity is important. Everyone in here, you could actually start a company, right? The first, and I've always told individuals who are starting a company, your first 10 employees needs to be diverse. Why? Because it's diversity of thought. And diversity comes in many different ways, right? It's physical diversity, it's ethnic diversity, it's even economic diversity. But if I'm starting a tech company, for example, and I'm looking to solve a problem, if someone from East Flatbush is on my team, I could learn from that person, right? I could learn from a person who is disabled and can tell you, and this has happened to me as a commissioner, when I redid the website, we had somebody in our team who had limited sight, and she was able to tell us that this site I cannot use, right? And so that's why diversity is important. It should never be a negative thing. It makes every company stronger, and Harvard has done studies on this, where if a company is diverse in their first 10 employees, their ability to make profits increased by 30-something%.
Wow.
And so diversity is, and history has shown, right, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we almost blew ourselves up because Kennedy surrounded himself with people who thought like him, right? So history shows, and God help us now with what's happening, but literally, if you have diversity, then you have diversity of thought, et cetera. So you have to be able to build a diverse team. You have to understand, not being sort of. I'm going down the list in terms of insecure and also your privilege.
True, you're very right about that. And we talked a little bit yesterday. Actually, we talked at length about DEI, which
Yep. I know you don't like using that
right.
word.
I don't like the DEI phrase itself, and I've shared this with some of you because it has become politicized. It has become something to be seen as negative. So I use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion whenever I talk about the subject matter. Because if someone says to me, you're a DEI hire, well, what are you against? Are you against people who are different? Are you against being inclusive? Are you against, what are you against? Someone who needs wheelchair access, that's inclusion, is it not? Is it not equity? Is it not diversity, creating opportunities for someone who needs physical access to a place that we're providing that to them? We talked about the ADA, which was, 1990 here. That act was signed into law. But I was sharing with Gregg, when I was 2 years old, my uncle had a diving accident and he was a paraplegic. He was also an Army general in Guyana. Never stopped him. He was doing ADA stuff long before it became something here, because when I was about 5 or 6, with him, visiting him, he was building chicken coops. You all know what those are, right? And ramps to get to those chicken coops. That was way before 1990, because if I tell you, you'll know how old I am. However, it goes to show that there is this work being done across the globe, and we don't recognize it until it becomes something that someone else pulls together, right?
It just makes us stronger.
It does.
And certainly for this institution, and I think you know this, in the city, we have over 100 and something languages being spoken here. And I think by law, we have to do, what is it, 8 or 10 or 12, something like that. So imagine someone who walks into this institution and can only speak Creole, right? Imagine when someone can respond in Creole, right? That person now feels that they are home.
Yes.
And they are now comfortable. And they are now able to tell you, I need care.
Yes.
I need this. I need X, Y, Z. A matter of fact, it would not surprise me if someone comes in here for one problem and now you have to find them housing, you have to find them food, you have to find them everything, because they'll come back to where they feel comfortable,
Yes.
right? And what does that do for you as an institution? It just makes you stronger, because then that person is going to tell you, well, it's going to tell their whole community, go here and talk to this one person, right? Hopefully that you have a whole bunch of Creole speakers on the team.
Well, not only that, but we have a phenomenal social work team that really works with our patients when they come in for their needs. And it's not just for healthcare needs, but it's also for housing, it's for, any support that they need access to. So that's why the beauty of Downstate is what it is, because you walk in and you see someone who looks like you and sounds like you and has the same sort of background that you do, you feel comfortable. And that is one of the things that I truly, and I'm very biased, of course, love about being here at Downstate. And I look around and I see people where I am comfortable talking like a Guyanese. But we do what we need to do, and it's the beauty of being in a place where I can be myself, because I can't always be this Dawn who waves her flag and wears it proudly and has it hanging in her office in any other place. This place for me has brought that home in such a way that I can't even begin to tell you. And that's why it's a privilege for me to be here and a privilege for me to work with folks like you all and to work with someone like Gregg. So I want to just turn for a moment. People know the Caribbean for its music and its food. Who's on your playlist? We're going to go back and forth here. I'm going to throw him off. Who's on your playlist?
Oh, wow. Oh, I wasn't expecting that one.
I know.
Because to be honest with you, so my playlist is very diverse.
That's as it should be.
And I know, all the Grenadians are going to be so disappointed in me. But yeah, you know where it's headed. Soca is not my thing.
Oh.
I know. But listen, I represent Grenada in other ways. Okay. So actually, I'm a piano, which is South African,
Nice.
and there are a number of different artists that I listen to. It's usually in Swahili or Zulu.
Nice.
And so I it's part of my connecting to the continent as well, is to understand the different culture out there. But also recently, gospel is also a big thing. So Tasha, yes, Tobbs, and there's actually, she's been on repeat a lot.
Nice.
For a number of reasons. But yeah, so the playlist is very diverse, but only, there might be I think it's like.
You better have Bob Marley somewhere.
Oh no, well that
That goes without saying, right?
that goes without saying.
Okay.
But yeah, but soca is definitely in August, one day. that
Got
comes
it.
out.
Got it. So I am trying to keep Gregg off balance, clearly.
Yes.
I'm not going in a direction that he will ever anticipate. And this is the beauty of having this privilege and having a friendship with Gregg, because this makes it so much easier for me and for everyone else to really enjoy a sort of unscripted conversation. So I'm jumping to something a little more serious.
Yep.
So you talked about someone coming into a hospital, our hospital, University Hospital of Downstate, and seeking care. But we know that across the board in communities of color, there has been that whole history of mistrust. But when you're coming from a country, a Caribbean country per se, and I'm using Guyana as an example, there are so many other things that you don't anticipate when you walk into a hospital, because the dynamics are different, the cultural beliefs are different. Here's for example. After I had my first son, my mom said, you have to have castor oil for 9 days and you can't bathe. I'm like, no. I had to have my husband take her someplace. I'm like, take her for a half an hour so I can shower, But those are some of the myths that sometimes people walk into Downstate with, because, another thing that is, I guess, I don't want to say popular, but it's been sort of part of the system, is that they don't go for health care. They don't go for prenatal care.
Yeah.
They come to the hospital, baby's born, oh, I'm having a baby, and that's it. And then they come into the hospital and find out there's so many other health challenges. What are some of the challenges you might know of or have come across in your travels?
So I think let me take a second, and I'll connect the dots here. So my current job, and again, this is a blessing, and this is for everyone. Always treat people with respect. And I'll tell you why I say that, right? Whether it's the security guard at the front, the janitor that's cleaning up this room after, because you never know where that person is going to end up. and you may actually end up working for that person. Um, so Joe and Clara Tsai, they own the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Liberty. They bought the team in 2019. In 2020, we all know what happened. Not only the pandemic, but we witnessed the murder of a black man on live TV, well, online. We were all stuck in our homes, and so we all saw that. Clara has always been focused on belonging. She's a descendant of Taiwanese parents. They moved to Kansas to teach, and she was born, in Kansas, in the Midwest. And so you could imagine someone of Asian descent in the Midwest feeling sort of like what we're talking about, belonging, et cetera. And so she's always had an affinity in terms of creating opportunity because she recognized that their wealth was also a blessing. So she committed $50 million to invest in Brooklyn over 10 years. We are in year 5 of that. And the reason why I bring up that is because every year, actually before she was talking to different people about who she should have locally here to run the foundation, and everyone she spoke to said, you should talk to Gregg, right? And that is why I say be kind to people. But also a closed mouth don't get fed.
That's right.
So you always have to speak into existence what you are looking to do. And so when I was leaving the administration, I started having meetings with folks and said, hey, I want to continue the work that I'm doing, investing in communities. And so that's how that connection happened. I won't say that it's, I could tell you how to get into philanthropy because these things happen. It's like the planets have to align, all these things have to happen. So that's why I said I'm blessed. But because of the extraordinary responsibility Clara has placed on me, I am now tasked with looking at different ways to invest in our community. And of course, I have affinity for the communities that I know well, which is, East Flatbush, Brownsville, Canarsie, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things that we did actually 3 years ago was we committed $100,000 to invest in organizations that are focused on maternal health, Black maternal health. Black women are 9 times likely to die in childbirth than their white counterparts. And that was 3 years ago in Brooklyn. And a lot of the source of that, right, and all the healthcare workers know, whether it's environmental, so asthma, high blood pressure, diabetes, et cetera, all these things are, when we started doing the research, are related to environment and community. Access to fresh food, right? Access or just living in an area where you're not choked by carbon monoxide, et cetera, et cetera. If you're in Red Hook, you have to deal with all the trucks that's going in and out. If you're in Brownsville, to your point, you don't have access to like healthcare. I mean, Brookdale is right there, but a lot of folks, they don't trust institutions, right? And so the things that I see is a general mistrust of, and I would say institutions, right? Whether it's government, whether it's hospitals, et cetera. And that's why it's important for you to actually sometimes leave these walls, right? People are not going to just walk in, right? Sometimes you have to be embedded in the community. I was telling you this story, and I know she said, don't embarrass me, but I'm going to. My mom, she was doing,
She's taking notes.
Our church, we used to do, and sometimes we do these health fairs where, because we have a lot of nurses in the congregation. And so, we're out on the sidewalk and literally people are just passing by and you just stop them. You just do a quick blood pressure test. And I'll never forget that one time where this gentleman was walking, he stopped, took his blood pressure, and immediately the nurses were alarmed and sat him down and said, you need to go to the hospital right now. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming we saved his life because his blood pressure was so high that that was a critical moment. And so sometimes whether you have a mobile unit or whether you go out in the community, you have to go out and meet people where they're at, develop that sort of link and bond and trust, and then they'll come into this institution, right? And that's why it's so important. So, and of course, the cultural connection is important, right? And so if you are doing a health fair in East Flatbush, I'm assuming you're going to have someone that speaks Creole, right? If you're doing a health fair, in Canarsie, you better have some Jamaicans out there, right? You know what I mean? You have to, and so having an understanding of our borough, a deep understanding of our borough, a deep understanding of our culture is important, because that is how you develop that trust. And so everything from, and I think, the major issues that I see is the food that we have access to, right? And the things that, we are trying to do on the foundation side. We gave a grant to actually the Botanical Garden of all places, the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, because they had a child farm program which taught young people how to eat properly, right? And why did we do that? The logic behind that is similar to the Stop Smoking campaign, where we taught the kids that smoking was bad and they pressured their parents to stop smoking. If you teach the young people how to eat properly, they'll pressure their parents to eat properly, right? But then we need to have access to fresh vegetables. We need to have access to just, some of us live in food deserts. And so, growing up I literally grew up down the block on New York Avenue and Beverly Road, right? The closest supermarket is Met Foods. I think it's still called Met. And so as a kid, we would walk over to Nostrand Avenue. What's over there? Chinese and Kennedy Fried Chicken, right? MSG and oil and all the bad things for us, right? But that's what we ate, right? And so I think, we need to educate our young people, the next generation, because all these things lead to high blood pressure, right? It leads to what we say, sugar, right?
Right.
Diabetes,
Right.
right? And certainly, like, obesity is another part of it. And I know obesity is like a cultural thing, especially if you're from the continent. If you are overweight, it shows like success and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right? Because that's
Not
sort of like,
anymore.
but we need to help people understand, like, incorporating some type of exercise in your daily routine. One of the things that, and I'll stop here, is, we and I remember this, the across the street was a pool. I don't know if it's still there.
The
For
campus,
this
the
for
campus
the
pool?
Yes, the
Okay.
student center. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had well, maybe I should say
Telling
this.
on yourself.
Should I say this? But employees, their kids had access to the student center. Well, if we didn't, then sorry, I did. but that's the only pool in this area. Think about that,
Yeah.
right?
The
Why
Flatbush Y doesn't have a pool, and they're
why
not far from here.
why do more black kids and kids of color do not know how to swim? Because we don't have access to facilities, right? And so we have to demand, and this is my sort of like speech in terms of being civically engaged. Hopefully, every one of you know who your council member is. Hopefully, every one of you know there's a race for mayor happening. Hopefully, you are looking at who is actually running and the things that they're talking about, and you're making an educated decision on who the next mayor should be. Because all politics starts locally. It
Yes.
starts with your school board, your community board, and then your council member. So access to resources. So one of the things that we do as the foundation is we have set aside almost $500,000 to invest in upgrading basketball courts across Brooklyn. Which neighborhoods am I focused on? The neighborhoods that have high rate of gun violence, right? So this is Canarsie, Flatlands, unfortunately, East Flatbush, Brownsville, right? And I'm looking at all the dilapidated basketball courts, and we're gutting it. We're building up new, fresh courts. And then what I do after that is then talk to the council member to put additional funding for programming on those courts, because it's not just enough to have a new court,
Right.
but you have to keep the young people busy, right? And so investing in facilities also is important as part of sort of like healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So I know I went off tangent there, but,
No,
but
it's
that's
okay.
definitely one of the things that I think we need to just talk about in terms of, exercise, eating healthy, et cetera.
Well, and thank you for all of that, because this falls under the whole social justice umbrella and enabling ourselves and each other to be able to take the next steps. Now, we know the civil rights movement, we know the 60s, we know the George Floyd movement, we know all of these things, we know Black Lives Matter. However, there's sometimes a disconnect between what's happening here in the US and what's happening in the Caribbean. Maybe it's because there was such colonial rule, maybe. I mean, lots of things. There can be so many reasons. And we talked about this yesterday in terms of how we get the language and the message across to people from Caribbean nations that social justice activity is something that you should engage in. And there's a dynamic across the board of how we connect and you all know this, there's the whole conversation about Black Americans versus Caribbean Americans. There's that whole dynamic, and it's very ugly at times. And you can also add those from the continent, how we look at Africans versus how we look at Caribbeans, all of those things. But we're all seeking the same thing, right? We all want safe homes. We all want no guns that kill. Well, I shouldn't say it that way, but we want gun rules that make sense, right? We want safe homes, education. We want access to healthcare and jobs. How do we engage people, young people particularly, from Caribbean nations who are just coming here from a whole different dynamic to a space where we're encouraged, despite what is happening now, to exercise our First Amendment rights?
Yeah. So let me start by saying what's happening now is a moment in time, right? This too shall pass, right? And I always go back to Obama when he said the pendulum will swing, right?
Yeah,
and so it swings, and unfortunately we are here in terms of ultra right, but I think at some point in time we're going to swing back, right? The thing that I really want to impress is that the Black experience is our experience, and I say our meaning as I'm speaking as a Caribbean American. But I think it's important for everyone to understand, because I know, especially for those who are first generation, you came here for opportunity. You got, maybe you were fortunate enough to have a house. You have your kids in college, or they've graduated from college. You're now saving up your money to build a house back home, and then you're leaving, right? That is everyone's story, right?
How many
That is
people are
it.
retiring back home?
Right. It's like I'm building a house and I'm leaving, right? But what happens, right, if the land that you had back home was taken by the government,
Yeah.
right? And you were promised land elsewhere and the government never gave you that land, right? That is the Black American experience,
Yeah.
right? The Black American experience is they were forcefully removed from the continent, but either here or we are descendants of slaves as well from the Caribbean, right? Brazil has probably the largest descendants of enslaved individuals. And literally, if you think Trump was bad, and this is why history is important, which is why in some cases you can't depend on our education system because you don't learn these things, right? But literally, after the reason why Lincoln was assassinated, right? After the Civil War, there was the promise of 40 acres and a mule. You've heard the story, right? And the president of the time of the United States said, this land is for white men and white men only. And that bill got to his desk and he vetoed it, right? That president is the source of now centuries of inequity, right? Because of that one decision. And so if you're African American, and when you went out to fight in World War I, you came back, you were subjected to Jim Crow laws. You went out to fight in World War II, you were subjected to the sort of like the civil, all the discrimination in the 50s and the 60s. If you were a veteran of color, you did not actually enjoy the benefits of VA, all the VA benefits. If you tried to buy a house in Queens, if you were a person of color, you were denied that. A bank would actually look at your skin color and say, I can't extend a loan to you, right? And we all know your first source of funds for a business or for send your kids to school is your your equity from your house. So if you can't own property, then you can't sort of like send your kids to school, you can't start a business, you can't do all that kind of stuff. So there's been generation and generation, and this is not to make a person, a white person feel bad. right? It's literally to just talk about history and facts. And this is where equity comes in, right? Because if, again, I'm 6'6", right? So if I'm racing somebody who's 5'5", I'm probably going to have an advantage, right? So if you are a person, if you're a white person and you have had an advantage in the 20s, 30s, 40s, you've had generational wealth, generational wealth, generational wealth, it's important for you to understand why a person of color does not have the same amount of wealth that you have, right? And I'm not saying you now turn over your bank account to that person of color, but I'm saying if you are in a position where you can create opportunities for that person of color, then that's what you do, right? And so that's why it's important for Caribbean Americans and individuals from the continent to understand the Black American experience, because it's by design to divide us, right? It's by design. If we all rallied around the Black American sort of cause and advocacy, we benefit from that, right? It's the same thing I always say, as Nigeria goes, the Black diaspora goes. Why is that? The United States has 300 million people as in population. Nigeria has 200 million Black Nigerians. How many billionaires can we get in Nigeria? When you are a billionaire, you look to invest. And when you invest in areas that are interesting to you. So imagine what happens if a Nigerian billionaire invests in, I don't know, maybe an airline that then connects Africa to the Caribbean. Imagine how much trade could happen between that with that happening. Imagine if you have minority and women-owned businesses getting investments, not from American banks because they're still using systems that are discriminatory, but from Nigerian banks, and they have the same amount of access to capital that individual that is in America that benefits from how American banks look at wealth. Right? This is why it's important that we cannot be so sort of closed-minded in terms of just looking at the local things, but we also have to look at international politics. We also have to look at why in the continent there's all sort of like it's by design to keep the conflict going, right? And to keep things, right, the minerals that are in Africa literally are being mined by, from the colonial nations. And again, going back to treating people with respect, whenever I get into a car, I speak to the drivers, right? Uber or Lyft, and you'll be so surprised. I spoke to someone from Mali who was talking about, France has more diamonds than any other country.
I didn't know that.
France have no diamond mines.
Wow.
Where are they getting the diamonds from?
Okay.
Right? And so this is why you're seeing sort of the Franco nations kicking out France and sort of like coming to the point of like, we are going to be self-determinant of our future, right? And so I'm not saying you guys should be sort of now, experts on geopolitics, but those geopolitics has a way of trickling back to the work that we're doing here. So that's why it's important.
Thank you. I just learned about France. Who knew? I just assumed, like every other place, there were diamonds. There's diamonds in Guyana. Why wouldn't there be diamonds in France, right? So I'm going to lighten it up a little bit.
Sure. I get passionate about this stuff. So
Really?
Yes.
What's tougher, New York City red tape or getting a Caribbean auntie to talk about mental health? Because, we don't talk about it in our community. Let's talk more about among our own culture.
And I want to say getting a Caribbean auntie to talk about mental health is tougher.
Yes.
It's tougher.
New York City red tape, you can stand in a line for an hour, right?
New York City red tape, you could move it, right? You literally can get to a point where we could cut the red tape, and I've done that. I've seen it done, but getting us to understand about mental health and what is happening, sometimes it's like, I could hear that you're too happy. What do you mean you're depressed? You're too happy.
Pick up a book. Go pick up a book. What do you mean you're depressed? Go pick up a book.
Right. It's like I just it is one of those things that we don't talk about. And I think we have a role to play in that. And I think the new generation has pushed us
Yes.
to really acknowledge that. I think there's a culture of trauma in the Caribbean.
Yes.
And
Can
we're
you talk a little more about that? A little more, just a
my
little more.
mom is here, so I can't really. but I mean, there's a number of things in terms of understanding, well, physical abuse, right?
Licks. Remember licks? I
Right.
remember licks.
Yep.
See this? That's because
Yep.
I didn't know my long division.
Yep, there's physical abuse, right? Which we sometimes, we pass over, but we need to understand what it does to a child,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to say something very controversial that is, I think some Caribbean islands are grappling with, but sexual trauma, like sexual abuse, right?
The unspoken conversations.
The young girls, right, who are on a school bus or on a bus, and the driver is hitting on a young girl, right? The driver's
Or
40,
worse.
50,
Yeah.
right? That's not acceptable, right? And that's something that we don't talk about because we normally don't talk about sex in the household, right? And so there's I think a lot that we need to, and I would say that institutions like this and even forums like this, where we are able, because sometimes parents and first generation folks, they don't know what they don't know, so they don't even know how to start the conversation to even have a session with their kids, et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes they need the coaching, they need to even understand that this thing that I have had in my life that I thought was normal is actually not normal, right? And so I think that is why it's so hard for the Caribbean auntie to talk about this stuff, because they don't have the tool, right, the language to even to start that conversation.
And it's interesting. I'm going to share something pretty personal. I want to say about 20 years ago, I realized that there was a history of depression in my family. My grandmother, my mother, my sisters, myself. But it's not something that they focused on because it was just get up, do what you have to do, right? And continue going. But you see the breakdown. I saw the breakdown in my grandmother. I saw the breakdown in my mother. And I followed the pattern that she followed. So my mom made, decisions in her life from a place of fear. And that's what my sisters and I did and this is why we talk about mental health. It's very important to find out and do the work on yourself. Because when you get to that place where you stop making decisions from fear because you've realized that that's what you've been doing, it's phenomenal. It's freeing. It allows you to jump out of a plane.
Wait, did I tell you I did that?
I did that.
Oh, okay. True story. I went up to Toronto and jumped out of a plane, and then I came back and put the DVD in and said, "Hey, Mom, look what I did."
Well, yeah, I did that, and I didn't tell my kids until I got down. I was like, I got something to send to you. But, me and Jesus, we had to talk before I got up there. I did it twice. I'm doing it again next year. Did you? Well, next year, okay, I'm challenging Gregg and anyone else. Next year, I'm celebrating a big birthday, and I'm jumping to raise $60,000 for an organization that I stepped on off the board, but it's an organization that works with women who are coming out of, they're reentering into the community. Nice. But they're hoping to do a matching donation. So for my 60th birthday, I'm trying to get 60 people to donate $1,000 each so that we can jump. So nice. I invite you to jump as well, okay? We'll do this and we'll come back. You heard that, right? That's recorded.
And now Mom is like, "Oh dear Lord."
So I know that, and I'm so grateful to you all. We do have to end a little early because you all know that there's something else happening after this. The governor is going to be here. But I wanted to take a moment, not just to say thank you, but I also wanted to take a moment. Well, we'll talk about that. But I want to open up the floor for questions for the next 10 minutes or so. I know that there are tons of questions, and Gregg has a ton of answers. So if we can grab the first question. Anyone? What? These are Caribbean folks. Come on, Dr. DeHovitz. You get your Caribbean star today. Oh, we've got two. Okay, let me grab Dr. DeHovitz and then we'll get you. Thank you. Okay.
Wonderful chat. Thank you so much. You spoke about getting outside the walls of the institution. We're in a very different world now. There's this thing, social media. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are about in terms of the utilization of that or how it's in this community.
Yeah. So thanks for raising that, because when we were talking about equity, I wanted, we run a boot camp every summer around Web3 and AI for high school kids. And the reason being is that's the future, especially AI. And I think, if you don't already have, you should build a social media team. Because, even you look at some of the council member, Che Osei, for example, he has figured out a way to communicate wins, communicate policy issues on his social media platform. Now, my personal sort of view of social media, it has caused the division and divisiveness that you see today because we are in our bubbles in social media, right? We follow the people that we want to follow on Facebook or Instagram, or, I'm dating myself now because I said Facebook and Instagram. Notice I didn't say TikTok because I'm not a TikToker. But literally, your kids are probably on TikTok and they're probably on other things that you don't know about, which is why you need to know everything that's out there, because they are out in the world and other people are interacting with them, right? And so they're learning things that you may not even want them to learn, especially at early ages. And so if you are thinking about how to communicate like health, wellness, mental health, all the services that you have to be able to deliver that in less than 1 minute. Because this new generation, their attention span stops after a minute 30. That's it, right? So everything that you have, if you have like a long description, you need a team that could boil it down into a concise, succinct 30 seconds and put it out there, right? And then that actually helps make the institution attractive to the next generation of individuals.
Do you have another question?
Hello, Greg. My name is Steven. I'm with the STAR program. So shout out to the STAR program. I'm a patient navigator working with people living with HIV and hepatitis C to connect them to care. And I'm also a part of the DEI committee. STAR Up committee. And my question for you is, throughout your career, you worked at the intersection of government and community. So what has been some of the biggest challenges you face when trying to challenge or change policies that negatively impact the community, and primarily the Caribbean community as well? And how do you navigate those? I know it was a loaded question. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I think so. So one of the biggest challenges for me was the lack of understanding that the community had about government and what government can and cannot do, right? And I think for me, what was actually empowering was for me to be out in the community and delivering that information about the resources that we had and how we could actually deploy that, and help translate sort of like the government language into plain English to the community so the community understood, and what I usually did, I would connect the dots, right? So when Trump came in the first term, we were concerned because a number, and I say we meaning the Department of Small Business Services, all our funding for our Workforce One centers, which is the centers that you go to find work and training, our business solution centers, where you go if you're an entrepreneur to get help with getting capital or learning how to start a business, et cetera, they all trickle through, believe it or not, the Department of Labor, right? These are all, before it used to be WIOA, and now it used to be Workforce Investment Dollar. Anyway, it comes from the federal government through the Department of Labor. And so the first term, Trump was threatening to cut those things. And I was in Brownsville, and they were looking to get a Workforce One center there. And I had to tell them, I can't promise that, right? As a government official, you never want to say no to the community. But I had to say no. And I said, this is why I can't promise that. And I explained to them about the federal government, how the funding sources work. And because we have this president and there's uncertainty, it would be irresponsible for me to open up a center and then the next year I have to close it. The minute I said that, they understood exactly what I meant, right? And so I think, number one, this is why I push on civic engagement. I grew up with conjunction, junction, and all, how to, if you remember how I'm a bill on Capitol Hill, blah, blah, blah. Like, I grew up on this stuff. So I understand the executive, legislative, and the judicial branch. There's a lot of young people, they don't understand any of that stuff.
Some of the older folks
I know.
in administration now don't either.
I had to explain to a 50-year-old at my barbershop why a judge could stop Trump from actually doing something, right? And so my point is that everyone in here, you are responsible for ensuring that the community that you're in understand not only how government interacts the work here, right? I'm so proud that the community stood up and said, we need to save Downstate. That could only happen if the community understands how to advocate for different things, right? And so I think the hardest part is really getting the community engaged. The last thing I'll say about this, the last mayoral race, and this is not Eric's race, this is when I was in the administration with Bloomberg, the second term, only 17% of eligible New Yorkers voted. 17%. That's a disgrace, right? And it's so, of course, de Blasio won by like 80-something%, and he's like, that's a mandate. Like, it's a mandate for change, blah, blah, blah. It's like 17% voted, right? I don't, anyway. But my point is that a lot of people feel sort of disconnected to government, and they don't believe in institutions. And so you have to sort of push on that because you are also an institution. And so if they feel disenfranchised by government, they're also going to look at you as also pseudo-government and feel disenfranchised. And so I think that is the hardest part, is getting people sort of actively engaged in civics.
That's great. I mean, it's a very good answer too, because this is, and that conversation, that question, Stephen, really does impact the work that we hope to be able to do by generating the interest of young people. There's a shift. I'm Gen X, and there's now, I think they started again. What are they now? Gen something or the other. Okay. A beta? Okay. All right. See, I didn't even know that. I'm so far removed from it. But we have to be able to, and as Gregg said, we have to be able to talk to that generation. My kids are like, why are you on social media? But I do it to embarrass them. I've done my job.
I hope you're not commenting on their photos.
No. All right. Well, lightning round.
Ooh, okay. Okay. Oh no, that's violent. I already got my foot in the soca music. Okay. All right. What do you have for me?
Who makes the best cocoa tea?
Listen, my grandmother.
That's the safest answer. Okay. Got it. Sorrel or ginger beer?
Ooh.
Or
okay.
Sorrel with ginger.
No. So here's the thing. So because I was talking about health, I got to go with ginger beer, because ginger, I didn't like ginger before, but ginger has so many qualities, healthful qualities, and sorrel is so sweet.
But it's so good.
It's good, but I only have sorrel once a year. And then my A1C levels, I have to check after that. But no, ginger beer.
All right. Do you say black cake or rum cake?
Oh, wait. No.
Let's figure this out.
We
black
say
cake or rum cake?
We say black cake? Black cake.
You sure?
I cheated.
All the black cake people, raise your hands. Okay.
Yeah, black cake. We don't eat that anymore.
I do once a year. Matter of fact, I have some in my office, Sean. All right, one more, I'll let you off the hook. Okay. Bacon shark or bacon saltfish? Ooh, with pepper. With pepper or without pepper?
No, that's too, no. Sorry. No, I have to say both.
Well,
I know.
both?
So here's the thing, like, I did not know. Oh, geez, I'm crying because I'm So to all the Bajans in there, shark. Like we had so I was introduced to bacon shark, and it is so good. It is really good, but bacon saltfish is really good too.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go with bacon shark.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's. Is that a question? Oh, you the bacon shark. Okay, go, 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 go. Okay. Ooh.
Oh, wait, black rice. No. Yeah. Yeah, so the thing is soup jamo. Yeah, soup jamo is my thing. Every New Year's Day, I'm chasing down my Haitian friends for soup jamo because it's so good. Yeah.
All right. One last thing. This is the one. Is it peas and rice
Oh,
or
nope,
rice and
nope,
peas?
nope, 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 nope. So, for the record, it is rice and peas. So here's quickly
Okay.
my philosophy on why the Guyanese culture is sort of like flipped, because you guys are like technically on the South African
Oh, wait,
continent.
wait, no. First of all,
And so
that would be South
so
American.
I'm
But
sorry,
we're the
South
only-
American
yeah,
continent.
land of
And
many waters.
I understand. I'm not sure how you were kind of looped into the Caribbean, but you are. We love you guys. But it is curry chicken and rice and peas.
And on that note, folks, this was a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for joining us online. Thank you, Greg, for being here, for all you do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Miss Yvette.
No,
Thank
seriously.
you so
Yeah.
much.
So the last thing, I just really want to thank everyone in this room for all that you are doing for this community, and you know the impact that you have. If you don't know the impact that you have, me sitting here is a testament of the impact that you have, not only for the current generation, but for future generations. And so, thank you very much. And I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. If it doesn't go unsaid, thank you on behalf of the city of New York and on behalf of Brooklyn for all the work that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. One last PSA. Tomorrow, we are holding the longest day photo shoot.
Ooh.
So please join us. This is in recognition of those who are cognitively impaired. My mom suffers from dementia. It's a pet project of mine, selfishly, and sometimes I get to take a selfish privilege here or there. So please join us for the photo shoot. We will be sending out a notice to remind you to join us tomorrow. So please join us and support. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great day.